So in this video, I will show you how we can complete Lab 2, which is building a VPC and Launch a web server. And then also we will go through an extra task that I want you to attempt over the weekend. And I would like you to repeat those steps as many times as you can, and you have time for that. So before I start, let me now go to labs.vocarium. Now in labs.vocarium, I will go to lab 2 and I will select my work. Then from my work, I will see that I have a lab. And this lab, as we explained in the previous video, we are going to build the following VPC with the following public subnet. So the main tasks are basically creating a VPC, creating a subnet, configure a security group, launch an EC2 instances. I'm not going to go step by step today. I will show you the overall result of this lab. So I will show you how you can complete the lab successfully. So now I started the lab, and if you go and you navigate down, you will create a VPC, and you have to basically remember those steps. So for this lab specifically, I want you to repeat it many times as you can, because it is one of the most important labs that you can do in the cloud. We are waiting now for the lab to be ready for us to be accessed. I could check the lab is ready or not from the details. So still in a creation, so we need to wait for a few minutes. So the first thing we need to look is to basically read what are the tasks. After we start the lab, we need to go to our AWS console, and from the console we need to access VPC, and we launch VPC wizard. So my lab is ready now. I can click on AWS console. Sometimes you will see this if you are logged in and you have to log it out. So all you need to do is just to click on log out and then click on the AWS again. So now I am in AWS console, and the lab is asking me to go to VPC. So this is my VPC. And from VPC, I need to click on Launch a VPC Wizard. If you go here, you will see that the lab is asking me to select a VPC with a private subnet, with public subnet and a private subnet. Now, it's very important for us to see the IP addresses that are given for each subnet so we can understand what is going on. We want to be to have a consistent IP addressing before what we implement and what they are asking us to do. So I won't select the first one, which is basically giving me a single public subnet. I will select the second one, which is a public and a private. I select this, and then I will choose lab VPC as a name. Now, the lab sheet is telling me that the first public subnet should be 10.10.0.0/10.0.0/24. So here we have 10 by default 10.0.0/24. And they are asking also to basically select the first availability zone. So we will select the first availability zone, which is US East 1A. And we need to change the name to public subnet 1. Now the IP address as well we need to give for the second one is going to be 10.0.1.0. And this is, as you can see, it's already activated by default. As you can see here, AWS also calculated how many IP addresses available for me in this subnet, and you'll see that the actual number is 251. I could change this, and this is one of the sweet things about the CIDR, that you can expand or enlarge the bits that are allocated for the host section to / for example 22, and then you make this as well /22. But you can see here we have an overlap because we need to make sure we are creating the correct subnet ID as well between the two IP addresses, because here we are just making the subnet really large. in that case. Now I'm not going to do this now. I just want to show you that these /24 and /24, they are not fixed. You can change them to /26. You can change them to /28 based on your need and based on the specification that you have. Now we can see now we have a NAT gateway, and this is the NAT gateway that they have asked us to basically select. And we need to select it from the elastic IP address. When you click here, you should see an elastic IP address available, and we will also enable a DNS host name, everything by default, and then we create the VPC. So once we click on the create button, by default the wizard will create for us the VPC, 2 subnets, an internet gateway, and 2 root table. So the public subnet has this IP address as a CIDR, and the private subnet has a CIDR of 10.0.1.0. In this task, we are going to be asked to create additional subnets, and this will take a few minutes because this is waiting for the NAT gateway to be available. So we have to wait for a few minutes before we can move on to the next step. A few things to remember, guys, that those routing table, they are not tagged, so we need to tag them as well. And here we are just handling one availability zone, which is US East 1A. As you can see, now the creation of the VPC went successful, and now we can click on the OK. Now, before you get panic about the next task, look here on the left, and you can see this is where you have your subnets. So we have 2 new subnets created for us, public subnet 1 and public subnet 2 in Lab VPC. We have also root tables, and we will work on them now, and just make a note of VPC ID. It is Lab VPC as well. And also we have an internet gateway, and that internet gateway as well is attached to one to Lab VPC and one to the default VPC that we have. Now go back into the next task, which is task 2. Create an additional subnet. So we will go back, select subnets, and we click on the create button, and we'll call this is public subnet 2. From the VPC we select Lab VPC, and we'll select 1B for our preferences. Now the diagram is asking us to use this IP address 10.0.2./24. So whether you look here or to look to the final product, but this is also is good to be used as a reference point. So this is going to be 10.0.2.0/24, and we create this. Now we need also to create another subnet, which is going to be private subnet 2. As before, it's Lab VPC 1B, and the IP address given to us is 10.0.3 as well. I just want to show you that if you put the same IP address as before, this will give you an error, because you need to have each subnet should have an identical subnet ID. So there should not be any a collision or any overlap between those subnets in the CIDR notation. So this is going to be 3, and we close. You can see now I have basically 2 new public subnet 1, private subnet, and this is private subnet 1. I could edit the name from here just to make it easy for us to remember and to link those resources with each other. Now, once we click and create, we need to go to the route table. And in the routing table, you can look, we have under lab VPC, we have two route tables. We have the one with yes in main. If you select this one, okay, and then you expand this and you look to the routes, you see this one is giving us a direction for all traffic to go to the NAT gateway. How I know that this is NAT gateway? All you need to do is to click on it and it will take you to this NAT gateway ID. So you can verify it has an elastic IP address. This is our elastic IP address and this is our private IP address. So based on the definition we studied in the previous slides and classes, we say a route table, once the route table is taking me to the NAT gateway, then this means any subnet associated with it is going to be a private subnet, and we call this a private route table. So we can remember that. Now if you select the second one, which is the lab VPC, you will find that this lab VPC taking all the traffic when you go to routes, all the traffic to the internet gateway. So when you click to this as well, it will take you to the internet gateway section of your AWS cloud. So let us go back and select route tables again, and let me label this one as my public route table. Now there is other thing we need to do. So we need to select the route table with the main equal yes, which means this is our main routing table for this VPC. And then we need to associate those routing table. So we need to go and to link to the subnet association. So we go to subnet association, we edit the subnet association, and because this is our private route table, it should be linked with the private subnet 1 and 2. We select them and we click save. Then select the public route table, edit subnet association, and then click on, let me expand this so we can read public subnet 1 by default, because this was linked by the wizard, not by myself, and this is public subnet 2, and then click save. So this basically now giving me the association between those routing table. So at the end of this task, you should end up with the following diagram. We have public subnet 1, public subnet 2, all linked with public route table. We have private subnet 1, private subnet 2 are associated with a private routing table. Now we need to create a VPC security group, and we need to edit the security group rules so we can use it to allow a specific HTTP traffic to come to our instances. Now from the same VPC here, from VPC service, we can select security groups and we create a security group. Now the lab is asking me to give it a web security group as a name. Let me select that, paste it here, and this is to allow web traffic. And let me now I forget how to spell traffic, and you select the lab VPC. So from the VPC here, we select lab VPC and then create. So we now have a web security group with an inbound rule, nothing. By default, all inbound rules are denied. So there is nothing you need to activate one by one yourself. And if you look to the outbound rules, everything is enabled in our web security group. Now after that, we need to edit the rules and we add an inbound rule to permit web request. So what we need to do is just to go back. We select the security group. Then from this inbound rules, we select one and we edit the rule, and we edit, and we click on add rule. Now here, once you select the type, there is a predefined, many of the protocol that we need that are predefined. So we select HTTP at port 80. Now the source of the traffic could be anywhere, which means 000/0, any IP address, any machine in the internet, or any IPv6 address. It's also very useful to put a description for this rule so you can backtrack them and use them in case of troubleshooting. Click on create, and this is now web security group is ready, and we can move now to the last task, which is launch a web server. We will go now to our services and select EC2s, and from the EC2s we need to launch a new EC2 machine. So we'll launch an instance. Now the lab is asking me to select, okay, the first Amazon machine image, which is Amazon Linux 2. Those name of machines are really important to notice when you launch your EC2s, because each one of them has its own patching script and its own way of installing and building software. So they are asking me to select the first one, which is Amazon Linux 2 AMI. By default, it's going to be the free tier T2 micro machine. It will be number of instances. It will be placed on our lab VPC. So now we are putting some resources in our lab VPC, and we want it to be in public subnet 2. Now there is something here very important for you to remember, which is allow auto assign public address. You need to make sure that this is enabled. If you use the subnet settings, then it will be disabled, and you have to enable it from the subnet level, which is an advanced step to do. So make sure you keep in your mind, in order to make this EC2 accessible from the internet, you need to make this enable. And now the lab is giving us a user data, a script that we need to copy as it is from the screen, and we just put it here under the section of advanced details, user data, and we paste it. And this script, guys, because I know that most of you, they would like to understand the code, is Apache script to install Apache web server and PHP. Yum install is a package installation in Amazon Linux AMI. We want to download it, the lab file, using lab-get, so you can even download this lab here into your machine as a zip file if you want. And then we unzip it. I don't want to save it in my local machine. Then we unzip it, and then we make sure to turn on the web server by check configuration that the HTTPD, the Apache, is on and the service is started. In next section, we look at adding storage, and then you make sure to add tags in the cloud. So keep adding tag. Here I think they want us to tag it as web server 1. So this is the name we need to assign to it. And now once we go to the security group, if you look to the security group, now they want you to select an existing security group, which is the one we just created in the previous task. So we could select an existing security group, which is our web security group. And you see the description, it's appear here, so you can basically look back and remember what you have done. Then review. I'd give you this warning, just press continue, and then launch with the key pair, which is the Vocarium key. Launch instances, and this now will be a new EC2 we just created and we put in our VPC. So at the end of this task, we end up with the following. We have an ad gateway and public subnet. We have public subnet, and we have a web server behind the security group in the public subnet too. And now this EC2 is functioning. We will give it a few minutes until it's become live, and you'll see now this EC2 is giving a public IP address, which basically we can access it from any part of the world. We need to wait for the instance to be fully executable. Sometimes it takes a few minutes for the machine to be active and accessible. Now after this lab, I will give you an extra optional lab that you can attempt later on, and this lab is going to build on top of these labs, so it will ask you to create a couple of VPC settings, and you can attempt that into your sandbox environment here in Vocarium. Or you can also practice this if you have an account into AWS education account. I believe all of you should receive an email from me about an AWS education account. If not, please email me and I will make sure to send you the invitation very shortly. So now I refresh the page and you can see now I have a fully functional website observed from my EC2 in US East 1B, and this EC2 is basically functioning at a public IP address and a public DNS address. This is pretty much what I have to do for this lab. At the end of the lab, I just end the lab. If I wish to attempt this lab again, feel free to do so. And by the way, you can exit and go back to the main screen of Vocarium. So you can attempt my extra lab here in the sandbox environment. You can just basically start the lab and it will give you access to a new EC2. Thank you for seeing this lab. Thank you for listening to those classes as well. And hopefully I will see you in the future with a new content by next week.